Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel, StrangeNet here. So today we're going to be taking a look at manufacturing, one of my favourite subjects, and the problems that come with trying to up production and the strains and pains that come with it. And I often say that manufacturing is easy and there's a profit to be made pretty much everywhere you look, and people, come to the comments, rightfully so, scratch their head and say, well, I can't find it, what on earth are you looking at? And the problem that I have is because obviously I'm not looking to make millions, I'm looking to make billions, and the approach is very different in a sense to what it is that I'm looking for. I'm looking for items that I can probably have a lot smaller margin, but I can make in bulk, and therefore I'm making up the vast majority of the ISK in the sheer amount of products that I can produce. Whereas if you've only got the one character or a handful of slots, then you want to be maximizing the amount of ISK that you're making per slot, and therefore it's a very different approach. And this causes somewhat of an issue when trying to explain how to make ISK from manufacturing, because I can't give you specifics in blueprints to buy and to produce, because the market is ever changing. So a blueprint that is profitable now might not be profitable tomorrow, and vice versa. So there is no one go-to in order to produce, because again, it's a market, it's a live market, and people will fill the gaps that are profitable at the time, and therefore you need to be flexible in regards to what it is that you're producing, and not have an inflexibility about you that, I want to build ships and therefore I will only build ships. And that's fine if you can find profitable ships, but don't just be, getting into the mindset that you're a shipbuilder and therefore, you're going to build it regardless of whether it's profitable or not. And so I'm just going to reel off a few things that are currently profitable, and at the moment the Mega Beam, you can build these and sell them and you'll be making about 600k per unit, give or take. Now not many of them sell, but the point is that obviously there's profit to be made there. You can also make it with the Mega Pulse. They're doing decently well at the moment. Somebody's just bought out the market pretty much, so again there you can fill in. Now obviously it's like, well, let's take one. There's not many sold, but we can do it with polycarbonates and mediums. Where are we? Polycarbs. And again, there's not that many. Decent amounts sell. You've got the medium version that's also making a profit. So there's lots of areas that you can always dunk into, and again, you can also do it with the Tech 2 versions as well if you're willing to do some invention. And this, it always baffles me when people can't find stuff to do, and again, it's just a matter of just putting yourself out there slightly and having a look. The medium polycarbonate, for instance, the Tech 2 version, is making in the region of 400k per unit. Now these sell pretty well. But there's loads of rigs to choose from, and there's loads of different areas, and I can't produce these, and larger manufacturers don't generally get into the smaller volume stuff, because again, it's it's just not worth it. There's not enough ISK to be able to scale this up, and that's just how it works. And for a smaller producer, it can be really beneficial to be not looking at, because obviously the things that I can get involved with where I'm wanting to make billions is relatively limited. Now obviously there are things constantly coming up and places to jump in, but you have to really jump on it as quickly as possible and to pretty much saturate the market and eke it out as quickly as possible, where for instance with these you just can't do it because there's not enough volume. And therefore, this will always be the domain pretty much of the smaller producer. And again, with looking at larger operations, I don't want to be building some medium polycarbs, some large polycarbs, some mega beams, some of this, that, and the other, because you want to be concentrated, especially when you've got 6 or 7 alts doing different things. You want them all concentrating on roughly the same thing, because otherwise you're having to move lots of different little bits everywhere. You're freightering stuff around, you forget to pick something up, where if you're just making, I don't know, whatever, If you're just making the one item, then you only have a list. You know exactly how much you need to bring for that specific item to be able to produce 7 times 10 lots of it for the next 3 days. And therefore it's done, it's simple, and you can just obviously stick it in your freighter and move it to wherever you want. Where, as I said, if you're making 10 different items over your 7 different characters, it becomes a lot more macro-managing. You're having to obviously do a lot more, and it becomes a lot more awkward. And therefore, yes, I say, as a larger manufacturer, you generally eventually get out of the smaller stuff because it's too time intensive, and it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot more focus. Because obviously you're having to watch it a lot more closely, and that takes up a lot more time. So as a larger producer of whatever, I generally stay away from things with smaller volume. But this is where, if you're not a hardcore industrialist, this is where the ISK is and can be made quite happily, and that you just need to find these smaller items and get in there, because again, the larger producers you're not going to be competing with people producing thousands of them. And because there's less people in the market generally, that means the margins are generally better, and therefore you can eke out a lot more ISK with a lot less capital invested. Some of them will take obviously a little bit of time, and again, if you go hell for leather for producing them, so for instance the polycarbs, let's just take the medium. So imagine these build relatively quickly. Let's have a look. And this is what you've got to be careful of, but you don't massively saturate the market. But again, if you're just doing, if you've got the 1 BPO and you're producing from it, then 167. Yep, and how many are we building? 27, so 2 per hour, so 48 a day, give or take, in jitter. And there's a decent amount there, so you're not going to saturate it with just 1 BPO. But for instance, if I had 10 of these, obviously, I would saturate the market very, very quickly. So, yeah, as a larger producer, it's something I wouldn't touch. And, as I said, this is where the smaller startup industrialist needs to be getting in and looking at more closely. You don't want to be looking at the huge items that have a lot slimmer margin, but again, you're dealing in huge volume, because that's not the market you want to be focusing on. You want the larger margins, because obviously you have less slots, so it makes sense to maximize the amount of ISK that you're making. And again, on average, I try, and especially for my manufacturing slots, I like to average 200 to 300k per hour. And that's pretty doable most of the time. But again, as a smaller industrialist, you can push that up to double at least, sometimes triple, depending what you're building. And yeah, and therefore, if I was just starting out as an industrialist, these are the areas that I'd be focusing on: the higher margin, but less volume. And again, if you find something with good margin and high volume, then obviously, if you can jump on it quickly, you'll make obviously more risk, and it'll be easier to sell. But yeah, obviously the bigger players will then be jumping in there as well, more than likely. And again, this has been seen with the auto integrities and the reinforced carbons and the life supports, that some people have obviously got huge orders in there, and again, they sell very, very well, don't get me wrong. Let's do the auto integrities. These have been selling fantastically well for myself, and obviously quite a lot of others. I've got some orders in at the moment. Just the 2, I thought I had more than that, but hey ho. So yeah, these sell in volume, and you can see the volume is going up as well. So that's going to mean more people producing them. But some of the orders in here are, I was going to say quite big, but it would appear that mine are pretty much the biggest, which is interesting. Maybe other people are just putting them in at smaller amounts at a time. But the point is, it's not a huge amount of. The ISK is pretty decent, but it's the volume that makes these very, very nice. And again, it's even when the profits are shrinking, just due to the sheer volume that you can build and sell, makes them good for larger production characters and accounts. So that's my bit. And again, people often say, "Oh, how should I start out?" And it's the hardest question to answer, because there is no way of starting out. Find a BPC or a BPO that is profitable. Research it, build it. When it isn't profitable, use the profits that you've made from it to purchase another BPO and rinse and repeat. And don't get into the mindset. Skills obviously play a part to an extent, but don't get into the mindset of, well, I build drones and therefore I'll only buy drones. Look around, diversify, because, again, just because one thing's profitable today doesn't mean it'll be profitable tomorrow. By having a diverse collection of BPOs, and this is why you see people, i.e. like myself, who has, thousands of them just sitting around, because I've purchased bit by bit and slowly built up my library to the point now where, it's a ridiculous list of BPOs that I have. I can't even see them here, but hey ho. So, yeah, I've got copies and BPOs and Tech 2s and the rest of it, and that's, over time the library has just grown and grown and grown, and I don't always use everything that I've produced, and then it just sits waiting for when it does become profitable, when I want to make it. And yeah, that's how to do it. Don't pigeonhole yourself into thinking, well, I only build ships, so therefore I only build buy ship BPOs. Buy what's profitable, make what's profitable, and then move on to the next thing. Don't sell the BPO, hold it, because again, there's a good chance it will become profitable again, and then reuse it when it's profitable, and rinse and repeat until you're comfortable and you're making what it is that you want to be making in industry. So with that, I think we'll call it quits. I hope that was helpful. Felt a little bit rambly, but always feels a bit rambly, but I hope it was useful and helpful. And again, it's really hard to say do this in industry or do this. There is no set path that you can follow. You've pretty much got to start it on your own, and I can push you in the right direction, but again, I can't tell you how or what it is that you need to be buying. Again, the market dictates that, and always will. So with that, thanks for your time, thanks for listening, fly safe, and I'll talk to you again soon.